Well, excellent. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you. I discovered you specifically through, I think it's Brooklyn Speculative Writers. Am I right?
Yeah, Brooklyn speculative fiction writers. Yep.
And how long have you been with that group?
Oh gosh, what year? I want to say 2010. 2010.
2010. So you've been in the city working on speculative fiction for the last 10 years inside that group. That's magnificent.
As a matter of fact, if you go to our website, I'm the one who did my friend Jonathan did the sketch, the drawing of our website banner with the dragon coin and stuff, and then I did the logo. I did the Photoshop on it. So we've been playing with this for a while.
What do you think in terms of the quality of New York City writers in the last 10 years, up or down?
Has it gone up or has it gone down?
Yeah.
I would say it's been like the people who have been writing from New York City, they haven't left for the most part. So I'd say it's basically the same.
That's interesting because we've been like gentrifying like crazy for the last decade or so. Right? So
yeah, but the people who were actually doing a lot of the writing that you see, they weren't in the neighborhoods that were being gentrified, or they're the ones who are gentrifying. So
it's interesting.
So they haven't really left that much. And the New York City speculative fiction community is kind of small. We see each other at the same events. Have you been to KGB, Fantastic Fiction?
No, I actually signed up for the group and was paying the dues for the longest time, and I just could never go to anything. I couldn't break. I have young kids. I have 5 years. They're going to turn 5 this next Tuesday. But it's been so. Thank you. That they're turning 5 or that I survived.
Both. I have a 5-year-old too, and she is an energy sponge. I walk in the door, it's like, "Daddy, daddy, daddy." It's like, oh God.
Tell me about it. And I've heard that when you have a boy, you experience a special level of joy also on top of that. But anyway, that's why I signed up. I could never go, so I just basically backed out of it. I wish I had. What was the point that I was trying to make beginning this? 10 years. That's a long time. It's a long time to dedicate to this specific thing. How long have you been living in New York?
I've been living in New York since I want to say 2006 is when I moved to New York City.
Where did you move from?
I moved from Rochester, New York. So I got my I went to University of Buffalo, got my BA in linguistics.
Linguistics.
And I took a year off from school, went to Korea to teach and to go to my martial arts world championship and to train with some monks. And then I came back and went back to UB for my master's in ESL. And then the goal really was to get to New York City. I think I'd come to New York City, I think once. When I started out, my first time coming to New York City was an undergrad. And it was when the Shaolin monks had come to Manhattan and they had a traveling Broadway show. And it happened to coincide when JetBlue has just coming on the scene. So they were selling tickets at a ridiculously discounted rate. So I came to New York, I think for total like $110, $120, like round trip. And so I was able to come, hang out with my best friend, who ended up fighting with his girlfriend. So I just kind of left them alone and just started exploring the city by myself and just fell in love. I had originally planned to get on the train. He lived in Brooklyn. He still lives in Brooklyn. And get off at Times Square. But, I didn't know one square from the other. So I just got off at Union Square, which was much better, I guess, feel for New York City. I mean, if you go to Manhattan Times Square, you're not getting New Yorkers, you're getting everybody else who does not live in New York in Times Square. So I just loved it from there. And then the monk show, and that was pretty cool. And then I walked around New York City at night and felt, I don't want to say safe, but invigorated. And I didn't get
invigorated. It's a great term for it. 2006, I was in grad school too. I just didn't like it. I didn't want to be in grad school. I didn't want to take undergrad classes where I wrote an extra paper on top of it. It's like, I was so bored. So I went to New York in 2006 at the Greyhound, and I went up here and I stayed in hostels, and for 3 days just went, this is what I want. I want to feel like this.
Yeah.
thing that I do matters every day. Standing in line for a sandwich, it matters if you mess up because you're not going to get your sandwich right away. You know what I mean? The guy behind the counter's not going to look down on you any differently. He wants you to stand in the line like everybody else. No, in New York, it called to me. It was beautiful. I love the
Yeah.
idea of invigorating. East Village is where I live now. It's just crazy. It's not anymore. Right now, it's real sad, but
Yeah.
when there's
Yeah.
people around, it's not a bad place to live.
No, I mean, it's, I would stay here forever if it wasn't for the, for the price that the actual literal price of living in New York City. So, if it was just me, I'd be fine. But, it's me and my wife, my daughter. So, we love New York City. I love living in Brooklyn. But, we always have to take a look and say, well, where else could we live if we wanted to? The issue for me right now is as I said, I'm a teacher, and I've been in the New York City school district for a number of years. So I'd be hard pressed to find a neighborhood, a place or another school, another district where I'd be getting paid as much as I am now, and not have to deal with the stress of administration who doesn't know what they're doing. So that's kind of the reason why I'm here still, because it's hard. You're living in New York City is expensive. So
I feel that crunch too, man. I do. I almost feel like the city has become inhuman as well, how it treats its people. I mean, the garbage situation alone is just horrible. You could look out your window and just watch the rats crawl around, and you're putting it out on the curb every day. It's kind of like it's getting worse and worse in terms of how they treat us in terms of rent and all that good stuff is concerned. It's hard not to fantasize about what life is going to look like after the coronavirus because, man, everybody left.
Well, those who
Stores are
had
being
money,
boarded up.
yeah, those who had the money and the means to get out, at least temporarily, they left. I assume many of them are going to come back. I mean,
Right.
certainly.
I mean, stores are closing. Stores that you would think are open right now that you would normally get delivery food from, they look like they're shuttered completely, like they're never going to reopen again.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we'll see. I mean, it's going to be.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that this is not that the reasons for the closing have nothing to do with any kind of economic devaluation. It's just you got hit with something stupid and stupid.
It's interesting though, because you say it does have an economic point to it because it hits people that aren't getting counted, right? Like the delivery people that would normally be out there delivering, they can't because where are they?
No, I mean like the reasons why businesses are closing are not because the businesses themselves didn't have value.
Oh yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying the reopening aspect of it.
Yeah, it's just like they're still going to be needed. This is the question when they come back. It's the question
when
of
they come back. Well, the people come back.
Yeah.
What you talked about monks specifically going to Korea to experience that, and also the martial arts aspect. Does that come into your writing?
Does it come into my writing? I mean, I guess yes and no. So I have yet to write a character who is Belizean American, Korean Zen martial artist. that hasn't come up yet. But,
what kind of characters do you write about? What's your favorite? Is that a hard question?
Favorite?
It'd be hard for me.
I'll tell you the character who somehow in every way has been showing up in like the majority, certainly in my novels, and in some of the short stories I'm working on. It's this Remy LeBeau kind of character who's slick and dangerous, and just has a way of talking where you want to listen to what they're saying, but they're really dangerous, those characters that often find a way into my story. As a matter of fact, that is the main villain. Oh, not Remy LeBeau, Gambit, but the kind of dangerous yet appealing character is definitely like the main villain of my novel. And for my first novel, which has been trumped, it was the main protagonist. Somebody who is has all the right moves to get all the attention that they could ever want, but the more power you give them, the more likely they are to abuse it for their own ends.
That's your main character.
Say it again. That was my main. That was the main character of my first novel, which I said no one would probably ever see.
Wouldn't you? That would almost be the opposite of the character that you would write if you were writing about your martial arts and your experiences with the monks in Korea.
Yeah, I guess so. I thought I didn't really think about them as connected. I mean, like one of the things that you see with monks is they're just people too. It's just a question of how deep are they into their practice? What are the politics of their, their particular faith, or their area? So, all that also comes into play just because I think here in the United States, monks and Buddhism in particular, it's almost, you don't really get a good sense of what that means. Because in one sense, if you talk to many Americans, they say Buddhism is not a religion; it's a philosophy, which is just Western BS. On the other hand, we think of monks, think of kung fu monks. So the religion part of that is so much connected as well. And there's a really complicated history there. But
yeah, when I think of monks, I think of dudes that are willing to bury themselves because they've given up every single thing that makes them human. So the last thing they do is give up their lives to, I guess, not wanting anything. That's what I think about. Like they dig up these terracotta pots and there are people in there just put themselves to die.
It's a question of
awesome.
living an ideal, and that ideal, if it's done correctly, it's not so much cessation of the self, but cessation of ego, so that you can be
exactly.
and mind and body, so that you can be more effective in directing yourself and directing others towards the end of suffering. So, but some of that stuff kind of gets a little bit weird. When you see people kind of encasing themselves and enshrining themselves, they're doing it to be an example, but some of that is, I think, a little bit off of what the Buddha wanted. It's kind of taking aspects of whatever culture that it was Buddhism was embedded in, and using that as I guess as kind of goes as the handwriting that goes with the print of Buddhism.
It's interesting because I like the idea of meditation. I want to be better at meditation. I try to meditate occasionally just to see how bad I am at it. And when I think about those monks, that's what they are doing at the end of the day. They've meditated this so well. They've accomplished this thing it's really impossible to still the mind. And they've stilled their mind so much, and it's magic almost in a way.
Well, the thing is, they're not doing it alone. It's having a community of people that are also doing it, which makes it infinitely more doable. Trying to be a monk, if you do not have monk training, if you're living in New York City, which is the most hyperactive place, on the East Coast, then you're setting yourself up to fail. It's I think when the Buddha says that, besides it's the Dharma, it's the and also the community, the Sangha, which is necessary to do what you got to do as a Buddhist, and like enlightenment and stuff.
Just going back to your first novel, your first character, the Remy LeBrew guy who wants to accomplish world domination or whatnot, does he feel the karmic backlog, like the karmic kind of slide?
Oh yeah, in fact, he knows that he's paying a price. He knows that when he gives in to, so basically he's a succubus, right? He's a succubus, and he is also the chosen one of a particular of a cult, and he's known that he was going to be this thing for a very long time, and to the point where him actually using his power, it burns him, like literally and emotionally, and with his family. And so he decides to leave all that, but all that won't leave him behind either. And the problem is, every time if he attempts to use his power, it's like a drug, and he doesn't want to stop. So, imagine somebody who has, who's an AA, the consequences of falling off the wagon are apocalyptic. So for him, like, he knows that there is damage to be done, and he's constantly focused on damage that he's already done, and he can't see a way out he can't see a way out where he gets to be the person he really wants to be.
Surviving, right? Does he have to hurt people to survive? Is that old conundrum?
No, it says that once if he decides, so it's his voice. So if he decides to really kind of sing, if he decides to really kind of connect to people, then that darker side of him, the one that wants him to be this cult leader, basically this God walking, it takes over, and it just wants and wants and wants. And it's very hard for him to turn that faucet off, because he also wants, because it feels so good to get what you want all the time.
Would you call that a monster story? Is your first novel a monster story?
Yes, absolutely. They're definitely the main characters are monsters. And the thing is,
that's the fascinating part, that you're writing about the perspective. They're writing the perspective of the monster, which is unique.
Yeah,
People
I think
usually
so.
writing from the perspective of the hero, and you're making
Yeah,
the monster the hero.
there's guys, there's an essay on monster. There's essays on monster theory, you know, and monster theory says that you know, not you, I should say we or communities, they make their monsters, and anybody who's considered liminal, kind of getting to the edge or touching the edge of what's considered normal, then they are playing with that monstrous potential. So that's what would ostracize them, you know. So I mean, like just one of my favorite examples, honestly, is a historical example from uh, the Crusades, and I think it was King Richard, really French, but King Richard of England. He was kind of like the Captain America, right, of Europe at the time, and his younger brother, also very well known guy, was best friends with one of the Islamic kings. Emperor is the wrong word. And he said, "Listen, no, I'm your friend."
Sultan? Would you say Sultan?
He, I don't
Shah?
think I don't. Shah. I think it might have been a Shah or the Shah's brother. And I said, "Listen, we're best friends. We see each other eye to eye. You know, listen, why don't you marry my sister, and then, you know, we'll be family, and then we can connect and we can have peace." And his brother's like all into it. The problem was that they had done such a good job of making monsters of Islam, and that there is no way that, one, the sister is going to go for this, the Catholic Church is going to go for this, and the people, England and France, like, what are you doing? That's a monster. They're the monsters. They're flat out evil. Everything you told us about them has made them evil. So, you know, so crossing that boundary, even for somebody who's basically like Captain America, that is kind of a betrayal. So that the culture is, at least in that story, was kind of reversing it, where the monster, right, the evil, was kind of in that Captain America center, and for him to try and do something else, and be something other than he is, there's a lot of pressure to push him back, and be the monster that they always want him to be. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm thinking about Richard, the Lionheart, and the marriage, the arranged marriage.
Well, just the idea that, you know, once you build this narrative, you know, a monster, it's very hard to take it back. And so, like, the story would be, how does somebody how does somebody try to get across that boundary? That's something that's absolutely necessary.
Well, yeah, it's completely cultural, isn't it? I mean, your monster is based on where you're coming from, because if the Muslim guy in the story is the monster, you don't want to bring that culture into your country or whatnot. That's going to be the monster. But the other side is, we want peace, and they're keeping us from preventing the marriage from happening. You're now the monster. It all depends on the perspective.
Yeah.
That is fascinating story development there. How many novels do you have written so far?
I have, well, I'm not including that one because, as I said, it's that's been a history. I have one novel that's written that I'm now in final edits with my agent,
Okay.
and yeah, so it's so the one, and everything else I'm doing is short stories and novellas.
Oh, interesting. What do you do with short fiction? Just send it out to the normal
Say it again.
places? Do you just send you send your short fiction out to the normal places?
Yeah. So there are, well, the fiction that is published right now was in Clockwork Phoenix 5, which was an anthology of fiction. Sonia Tape's in it, C.S.E. Cooney's in it, Carlos Hernandez is in it. I was very Mike Allen is the editor. It's nice to be able to work with friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I would count the podcast I produce, Kaleidocast, as production. Although I get to be, I'm one of the writers. Is also one of the actors in it. And what else? I have it's interesting, they call it published. So I have a short story, which is a space fantasy, which is not so much published as being used. So there's a Carter Hall School of Folklore in the Fantastic. And they are a folklore education institution. And so I wrote a story for them, and that's titled Valiant at the End of the Universe. And so they're using that as curriculum material, but it's not published in the normal places. So, but actually, as a matter of fact, I just had a BSW meeting just to tweak it out, just to tweak it a bit, so I can send it out there and see if I get any bites.
Do you intertwine your writing in with your English as a foreign language teaching?
How do you mean?
I mean, writing is so important for language development. The actual speaking of it, if you can sit there and immerse yourself in the language, it's really awesome. But writing it and seeing it in front of you really helps the mind kind of articulate it in a way. Do you incorporate writing in your teaching at all?
Oh, you know.
Uh-oh, did I lose you?
Over.
Oh, I might have lost you for like 30 seconds, or about 10 seconds there, if you wouldn't mind
Okay,
starting over.
So in New York City, ESL teachers at the elementary level,
Mm.
they don't have their own class. And we go into other people's classes. And for the last couple of years, we've been working with what's called the Teachers College Reading Writing Project. So they have their own curriculum, and we to implement it correctly, you have to pretty much try and stay with what they have written. So it's been a while since I've had a chance to really incorporate my own writing, my own expertise. Every once in a while, they'll ask me to do some professional development. So like I did, before we did this curriculum, we had our own, and I wrote the folklore curriculum for the 5th grade. And so I was able to talk to them about that. And then again, in that curriculum, also we did science fiction. And so I worked with them to do the science fiction curriculum. Actually, I did a website with them too. It was pretty cool. So it was helping the students brainstorm ideas and start writing. And they came up with some really, really cool stuff.
Oh man,
so that was
yeah.
that was a lot of fun. But that is not something that I get to really play with anymore, because it's not like genre fiction isn't really part of our curriculum. The students are doing realistic fiction, and they're doing historical fiction. And so that part's a little interesting, because then I get to pull in not so much the genre aspect, but I do get to pull in African American history, Black history, because our students, I work in a population which is mostly Chinese from Fujian province. This is the Sunset Park. So
Sunset Park. Okay, you're right up the street from my wife. They're in Greenwood.
Okay. Yeah, in the cemetery. Very often I'm one of the 2 only Black people they see in the course of the year.
I've heard that's awesome. If you can get a teacher, if you can get kids in front of an African American or Black teacher, they're less likely to be racist growing up. I read that non sequitur someplace. I'm sure it's true. I mean,
just hoping,
right? I mean, you got to have a little acceptance in the world going forward, and it's ridiculous what's happening now. I thought this was over with when I was a kid in high school in '95. I thought this was over with almost.
Oh no.
It's unfortunately still there, and we're still dealing with it.
But it's also the people that are doing the teaching. When Donald Trump was elected, my principal hold a meeting for the entire school and said, "Listen, I just want to let you know that what you post on Facebook is not private, and people will tell, and people will show it to the superintendent and other people, because teachers who were Trump supporters had posted these vicious, horrible things about their students. Like, I'm gonna throw this kid over the wall, and going on. And then even the superintendent had written a letter saying that, listen, these students now are feeling vulnerable, so we should be, more open and kind of listen. And there was a surprising backlash from teachers and from non-teachers as well, who were sending her hate mail. So, I mean, it's still there. I still work in the same building with teachers who are Trump supporters, and they make it really clear. So thankfully, I work in the 4th grade, and none of those teachers are there. As a matter of fact, I changed grades because of that. But yeah, it's absolutely still there. These people, they're not dead. They didn't disappear off the face of the earth. They're still in power. Yeah, it's gonna take a while.
Yeah, that's what worries me. They're still in power, and some people are actually doubting that they'll lose power in November.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Do you write apocalyptical fiction at all? Do you write about a dystopian future, or is it more just the monster genre kind of thing?
No, no. I mean,
Horror
I
fiction.
honestly, I'm trying to go in the other direction. My latest pieces of professionally published work have actually been nonfiction, been essays. An essay on Afrofuturism and solarpunk, and the necessity of the two. I published that in Tor last November. And
I
then I have
actually saw that title and clicked on the article. Meaning I read the title and that's it. I don't remember reading the article itself, but I think I remember saying that.
Yeah, it's in search of Afro-solarpunk, I think is the name of the title.
So I was curious about Afro-solarpunk.
Have you heard of solarpunk?
So SOLAR, right? As you're saying, solarpunk? No, I've never.
Yes.
Explain to me what that is.
So think of solarpunk as what comes after you're sick of dystopian futures. So these are futures where the main characters and the main drive of the story is to think of realistic solutions and a speculative bend. So it's been around for quite some time. Just that now I think is getting a little bit more attention. So solarpunk fiction is looking at ways that not just emerging technologies, but technologies that we already have can be implemented and integrated into a new kind of system. Also looking at new economies, or what comes after capitalism, looking at how do you find solutions, and not just how do you find them, but the problems and the dilemmas that come up, the story problems that come up with these solutions. And solarpunk, it's relatively near future, but there is an expanse of experiences which you see in solarpunk narratives. The majority of which though have come out, I want to say, like in the last 5 years, you've seen like the most solarpunk fiction coming out and being produced. The first one was actually produced in Brazil, and that was about, I want to say, 8 or 9 years ago. And that definitely has a very different perspective than, say, the solarpunk just produced in America and in the West and in Europe. But they're all talking to each other. So the main idea is that a positive future comes from a reduction in racism, an increase in human connection, and a different way looking at how we connect to the world and to our technologies, which technologies we're going to use going forward, and then how do people not just create a sustainable future, but also deal with the consequences of what we've done already. And there's going to be generations which are just going to have to live through it. Like, there's nothing you can do. That boat has sailed. I mean, it's already happening now, but to an even greater extent. So it's looking at the lives of those people as well. But again, towards finding a new normal, or finding ways to get back what was lost in some ways.
You almost have to have a complete systematic reset, though, because the way things are going, the damage that's already been done generationally it's not going to stop to make it better. You know what I mean? The problems are getting worse.
Well, I mean, like the thing with solarpunk fiction is that for the most part, it
starts with an asteroid hitting the Earth and wiping most of civilization out, right? Or something.
No, it's more looking at communities. So it's not global. For the most part, it's not global. It's looking at how a city or town or people who are in one part of the world, and how they're dealing with it. It's not as if this is a new, complete global order. Although very oftentimes you will get some stories that are dealing with the impact of, say, the changes that are made by a nation. So for example, there's one from hieroglyphics, which is not necessarily a solarpunk, but it kind of, some of the stories definitely are. Anthology is not solarpunk, but a lot of the stories are. And there's one which I think is particularly realistic. At the same time, it's right there on that edge. We're talking about it's the solution and the consequences that come from that solution, right? So this one story, you have the entire Mexican border, right? The southern border has been geared up. There's a wall, but that wall is a corporate wall, and they're using the technology along that wall to suck up solar energy. And so from this wall, they're able to sustain the majority of the energy needs from for the United States, right? But there is an impact on immigration. And the story is about these two Mexicans who are decided to come to become, to cross the border and they become American. But to do so, you have to live in one of these kind of like Google villages.
Yeah.
But it's with an extreme amount of invasive surveillance to make sure that whoever's coming across, you are going to be beneficial in some way to the United States. So like there are engineers and they're tech experts. So I mean, there's a lot there that deals with what do you do now with our current system without a hard reset. A hard reset implies first going through a serious dystopian fiction. Like what we have right now, dystopias that you see, it's like you say, it's like a meteor hits, or disease wipes with everybody. Or there's a global World War III and nobody's spared and everything breaks down. So we're not talking about stories that have gone through a dystopia. We're talking about stories that are dealing with the economic and the environmental impact at different degrees, different points in time. And again, it's always geared towards not just a solution where there is a happy ending, but where the communities that the communities and the characters you're talking about, they are giving examples of things that for them oftentimes can be done now, or could be done in the near future.
And when you say Afro, are you writing specifically from African American or African, or how would you say this?
Like Black or African American,
Black perspectives.
So like the impetus for the first essay was that solar punk is wonderful, but as anti-racist as they are trying to be, and where they have a lot of they overrepresent when it comes to minority characters and female characters, the creators aren't. Their creators are still mostly European, and they're talking about things which, to be honest, they don't have a lot of experience with sometimes. And if you really want to be something that is, inclusive, and not the PC way, but you're telling stories that are going to get more people's attention. There is a massive community of Black speculative fiction writers who are doing things that I think you want to pick up on. And also just to kind of bring them into the conversation, because otherwise it's the solar punk it misses something that I think is important. And the people who are anthologizing solar punk, I know them and they're good people, and so they're looking for this, they're trying to find this work, and for whatever reason they're just not able to connect. They're not making the connections that they say they need to, that they want to. And that that the online communities for solar punk really is kind of where it's at. And those online communities, again, they say they want to, yet there's very little outreach. It's as if they just kind of expect, at least the digital communities, not the anthologists, but the digital communities kind of expect that, well, we're here, it's a good idea. Of course, minorities are going to come to us, which is definitely not the way it's going to work.
It's sad, isn't it, in a way that's still kind of happening, where people are grouping up together to feel safe against attacks from other places. We're not really being very inclusive. We're just kind of sheltering with each other. Stay away. I don't know if you're safe or not.
Well, we're doing our best. I mean, if we're talking about coronavirus, it is.
No, just period, in terms of just everything. Like we were just talking about racism, racist people, Trump supporters. I mean, yeah, you'd say Trump supporters, I get a horrible, disgusting taste in my mouth. There's only one type of person that I think about. They're out there protesting social isolation, whatever's happening. But it's unfortunate to me that when we talk about solar punk, which is a sensational idea, I love the idea of it. Of course, my writer brain is going crazy. How can I use this? I want to write a story right now. The other side of that is there has to be Afro-solarpunk. You know what I mean? There has to be a perspective that is inclusive to that particular group of people, because outside of the writer writing that story, the people that are reading it are going to be in that community also. Really is what that story is being written for.
Yeah. So I mean, I think what I was getting at there was there needs to be an aggressive outreach for that to take place, because I don't know, I surveyed African American authors, and before I wrote the piece, and many of them they have not heard of solar punk, or they're still writing in a dystopia, because dystopian fiction it's easier to imagine, you know, and just historically for us it's been easier to imagine because we've lived it, you know. This is we live in different degrees of dystopia, so it's trying to find a way past that, you know. And we've
trying to get it way past nihilism, right? Trying to be a little bit more positive about the stuff you're putting out in the world.
Yes, like, I mean, like, you know, historically, you know, there's been the Black church, and there's been, you know, there have been the you know, the activist movements, but the activist movements are always, they're always a minority of a general population. So like you were talking about, you know, the Trump supporters. Well, those people are going out there again. They are only the activists. They're only like the very tippity tip of the spear. People who support this kind of this psychology that which would underlie Trumpism. So, you know, on the other end, you know, if we're talking about finding hope, well, the issue is that I think that minority communities, particularly Black communities, have been pushing and striving to get to this point of some kind of equality that is reflected in
it's almost too reasonable. It's almost too, you can't expect them to be reasonable, though. It's unfortunate.
Oh yeah, well, no one you can really expect anyone to be reasonable. I think that's the whole point of narrative.
I think the communities that you're talking about are being reasonable, though. The people are just asking to be fair. When the NFL players are kneeling, and it seemed like a whole section of the country went, no, you're not allowed to complain about getting shot. Stop kneeling now.
When you said reasonable, I misunderstood that. I thought you meant that people act based off of really logical rationales, and I think it's not that, and the rationale comes after kind of the emotional underpinnings, and it's hard. That's a difficult thing to get around. I think, honestly, that's what narrative is about.
As you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that you have to bring the fight to the Trump supporters. You have to bring the fight to the racists. You have to shove it down their throat somehow, something or other. And maybe it is solar punk, you know, and maybe it is a perspective story that, I don't know. I mean, what can you tell me? How do you get away from, how do you bring the fight to the Trump supporters so they realize their own stupidity and the world becomes a better place and still be able to tell the same stories?
Well, you know, for me, I mean, that's the question of the ages, right? Now, so how do you get somebody who thinks something which is diametrically opposed to what you consider just basic your own survival? I mean, honestly,
a great example is, what's his face? Oh goodness me, Thomas Edison, who's his friend, who loved pigeons. You know who I'm talking about?
I mean, the one who also was should have been credited with.
Yes, exactly. The one whose all his ideas were stolen. What was his name?
Yeah, I know you're talking about. But as far as, you know, what do we do with the narrative? It really does, I think, mean just creating a community with a critical mass of people who look and think, rather look differently, but are telling stories of a shared future. You know, at a certain point, it just becomes, you know, on Netflix, on HBO, in the magazines, in the newspapers. Their friends are their friends and family are dating people of a different persuasion, you know, even with some different political persuasion. I mean, these are things that have to be integrated. As far as putting it in the people's faces, you know, I personally, I would say that yes, that you have to have a tip of the sword who is going to, you know, if you don't move out of the way, I'm going to fucking stab you. But you know, that can't be the only solution. It's not going to work for all people. Certainly, it's not going to work for most people. Particularly, you know, if you are a minority. If you're a minority, then that also means you're a power minority. So if your only act is to have a sword in your hand, you just have to understand that everyone else, the people you're fighting against, they also have swords and guns and the military and the police. So you have to keep in mind that the ultimate goal is integration, and integration into something which, you know, honestly fought quite a bit for. To be American to be American and be Black, and that being totally cool and totally great. Not having one being negative one way or the other.
Or matter, exactly.
Well, no, certainly it matters. Both of them matter, but the fact that they're looked at as value added rather than value taken away. So if you look at people think of American or Americanisms, and that has a negative connotation, right? Particularly if you're on the left, as a negative connotation. If you don't live in the United States, as a negative connotation. And then and for being black, same thing. You know, literally, it's like the word black, you know, it's just automatic. You know, I mean, it's one of the things I try to get at in my writing is changing that. What it means when you think of the word black. Because I think one of my main character in the novel that I'm working on, the one that all things work in my favor that will be published, he is this child with an amazing imagination, and he comes to realize is that one, he's never been afraid of the dark. The dark can scare him, and all the most beautiful things in his life come from that dark. It comes from when he closes his eyes. All color, all light, all things come out of that dark. The darkness was first, and that's not something to be afraid of. It's something to be again, to invigorate. You know, when you dream, that's coming out of the dark. Everything comes from there. And honestly, just as much as people say that you can have too much darkness, whatever, same thing with light. You know, it burns, it bleaches.
Well, with that character too, it's the experiences that he has that make the problem ultimately. The child is young and innocent, is yet to experience the world, so he's able to have the fantasies.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Also, I think I'm trying to get at the story is that when we think about childhood, oftentimes we think about innocence, which I think is dangerous. Really, what it should be is powerlessness. When you're a child, you have people.
Yeah, that's another one of those symbols, right? When you talk about symbols, it would be innocent and then also powerless, depending on what kind of situation you put that person in.
Yeah, it's like, so for him, inside his own head, he's powerful. In his imagination, he's powerful. But when you put him in a situation with adults in the adult world, which is generally the world, then he's constantly fighting for power, and he often doesn't get it. And not getting that power, not getting that kind of autonomy, is something that I think is I think it's a universal problem, but also it's a particular kind of problem that children have to deal with. And you know, there's do you know who Alice Miller is?
Name is really familiar, but I'm going to look her up right now. So you have exactly 3 seconds to tell me.
Alice Miller. Well, just wait.
You know what I wanted to ask you while I'm looking up Alice Miller right now? What got you into writing? When did you actually start writing stories down and say, this is something I am going to pursue the rest of my life? How old were you?
I want to say 27.
27, really?
Yeah. So, you know, my writing and art came something that came very, very easily to me when I was younger. But I never saw that as either one of them as a career goal. And when I went to University of Buffalo, it was not, and I still kick myself to this day, it was not to do anything with literature. It was not to do anything with writing. If anything, that just helped me get through some of my classes more easily. I mean, I usually there's a test you take at UB, at University of Buffalo, just to see what kind of prerequisites you need. And I tested out of the writing prerequisite. It was the math, which killed me.
Math was my thing too.
Yeah. So, and for art too. So I had to, you know, I just did linguistics. Honestly, the only speculative fiction that I read from the time I left high school to really the time I started really writing again was comic books. I put everything else away. It was just linguistics. It was just science. It was just the research. It was just history. That's all I was doing. And then I moved to New York, and I did Dungeons and Dragons with my friends.
Oh yeah.
And I made up my own campaign, and I put so much time into it that my girlfriend said, you know, Cameron, you wrote like 100 pages worth of notes for this campaign. Why don't you see what's out there, you know, and join a group? And then I went to KGB Fantastic Fiction. You really should go. Just check it out. It's in the city, and and I was like, wow, this is a community of writers here. It's not even BSW. It's not a BSW thing. And I want to get more into this. And then I found BSW. It just so happened at the time I was living in Queens, in Forest Hills, so it was a long commute, but it was definitely worth it. And I started writing and finding that, oh wow, I really missed this a lot, and there's so much that I want to say. And I always go back and I think, wow, I wish, you know, not so much I wish, but I'm surprised that it took somebody else pointing this out to you, to me, that I went back into something that felt so natural, not easy, certainly not easy, but felt like I was doing something with my life that I can do forever. Like when I teach, to be honest, I've been doing it for a while. I was teaching before I came to New York, before honestly I even got my degree. So it's a job that I can do anywhere. And it's a job that pays the bills. But if I had to say, is my heart and soul into educating people and teaching, being in a classroom, I would say no. I say that it's an important job, and I want to get paid for an important job, and have summers off, because that's important.
You know, I honestly, if you had said that your heart and soul is into teaching kids, I would be a little bit, I wouldn't believe you. I mean, it's a hard freaking job, and you work in the New York City school system. And I am never more scared for my life than at 2:30 in the afternoon or whenever the hell school's let out. I try to avoid it. I don't like it. It's like there's 13-year-old kids running around. I don't want to be anywhere near them. So I mean, I don't think you're a hero, but I definitely don't know. You're not in it for the, crop on the back.
That's the thing though. A lot of people, a lot of teachers, this is what they decided I really want to do with my life. And this is, besides their family and their religion, this job, to be a teacher, I think, and do it well, you do have to go above and beyond. You are a public servant. And even though there is a bit of hyperbole around heroes and in hero worship, you kind of drop them into the same bucket with police officers and firefighters. There is something to that giving and being expected to give.
Even those guys are not heroes. They're out for the retirement at the end of the day. They're not looking to give up their lives in a fire. They want to go to Florida at 65. I mean, honestly, I read an article a couple of days ago about hero worship, and it really resonated with me. I'm just so tired of people saying you're a hero, and you're just doing a job. They're just doing a job that you didn't want to do, basically. I don't want to teach people. I really don't.
Yeah.
I joined the Army, and I got out, and people are, you're a hero. No, I'm not. I want college money. I'm not a hero. I'm selfish as fuck. I really tried not to dig as many holes as I did. That's all.
Yeah, but even so, if you're being in the military, I mean, there's a certain amount there's an expectation of sacrifice that I think that's one of the reasons why the military is not, a lot of people do it.
Now there would be, like if I joined today,
the population.
I'm 43 years old, I'd be sacrificing a lot. At 18 years old, I was so excited for the adventure. I mean, I wasn't sacrificing anything. I guess people die, right? But they don't think they're going to die. Nobody does until it happens to them, and then it's a tragedy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's you. That's you in the moment. That's not the way that the culture sees you. Once you put on that uniform, whatever that uniform is, you're considered a hero because now you are on that wall. You're the one, the tip of the sword. And yeah, thankfully, we don't have to be the ones to do it. We're not the ones who have to poke you, have to use you to use you. Thank goodness that somebody has a sword and that somebody decided they want to be the sword. So there's this little bit of I guess an understanding of the fact that someone else was willing to do it, whatever the reason, and even take the chance that maybe you're going to have to go and fight a war. And there are people who do really believe that. I mean, I when I was in my undergrad, my master's degree program, I think. Yes, this is during the Iraq War, and one of the guys left our program because he's decided, you know what, I'm I'm a Christian, and this feels like a new crusade.
Oh, crusade.
Yeah,
horrible,
and so
horrible.
I was like, wow, okay,
dude.
well,
You're not a
really
Christian. I don't think you think anything of the tenets that Christianity preaches. You're going to go over there and kill people. That's just disgusting. That war really bothered me a lot. I did not serve, thank God, in either one of those wars. But I had a lot of buddies that went over there and came back in pieces. And man, it's not good. Not good at all. So Alice Miller is a disciplinarian, right?
Is a what?
The right person? A disciplinarian?
No, the opposite of it. Okay, so you would look up a book called A Drama of the Gifted Child, I think is the
Drama
most popular.
of the Gifted Child, okay.
Yeah, and so to make a long story short, but it's a short book though. Alice Miller was deconstructing the kind of the mythos around childhood and the instructional practices of child rearing, which had become institutionalized in the West. And what it really was a kind of institutionalized abuse. And some of it was physical, a lot of it was physical abuse. And also a lot of it, though, was also emotional abuse. And a lot of it comes from the parent, the adult, not being able to, rather projecting all the things that they didn't get onto the children, and not just an individual adult parent, but the culture And the I guess, tropes is the wrong word, but the general understanding and zeitgeist at the time of what it meant to be an adult, which is caregiver slash law bearer, more so. And so and that is in line with a kind of a psychological history. I'm using the wrong word. I have to go back and look. Of how, over the course of generations, we have become less and less dependent upon what's the word? Kind of a patriarchal top-down kind of understanding of how we deal with children how we deal with children and the psychological needs. And at her stage, when she was talking about it, it just kind of at that awareness, that general awareness of, oh, the kind of adulting really that you were brought up with, that this is kind of what's feeding the larger issues. Because when you become an adult, then you do get power, and that power gets used in many different ways, which we'd rather it isn't. Much of that is directed back towards children, but also a lot of that is directed towards each other and how we, some of the reasons why we get into wars, some of the reasons why we're addicted to certain things, some of the reasons. And so she gets into it's a very detailed conversation about how that starts and where that comes from. And that book, along with some of the others and people who are also writing on similar things, is kind of what inspires me for this particular book, the novel I'm working on now, because it is looking at the consequences of seeing children as innocent and also taking advantage of their position of powerlessness, but told from the perspective of the child who was trying to get power in the best way they know how, and for the majority of the time, children trying to get power fails. And so what can they, even in failing, what can they succeed at? What are the truths that they can
man, every time you fail, you learn, right? You learn what not to do.
If you're paying attention, if you have the opportunity,
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My father's family comes from the coal mines of West Virginia, right? His family starts there in like the turn of the century, but at one point they were farmers with like 12 people families or whatever, and somehow one person got annexed off, and he was an incredibly abusive man. Like, he would not accept weakness at all. My dad ended up joining the army, becoming a military officer or whatever. He had a very strict bearing about him. He's not a very go pursue the arts type guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That kind of self exploration is anathema to people who kind of brought up like that.
Yeah, it's a no. You have to be on the farm. You have to be dirty in the mines. I mean, a lot of these people died in their 60s from black lung or heart attacks or something like that. I mean, they were not happy guys. They were very, very abusive people. I can't imagine flourishing in that environment and becoming something amazing. And I don't think there are a lot of amazing writers in the baby boomer generation that came out of West Virginia, or artists for that matter. I didn't escape. Charlie Manson escaped.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know who considered fantastic in that point. But I mean, it's just the idea that, again, like those people who are super abusive, though, they're the tip of the iceberg. They're the tip of the sword. It's the malaise. It's the majority of people who, while they might not be those cases, which are kind of monster sized, because like the people who are super abusive, we can look at them and we can put some distance between the two of us and say, you know what, I'm not him, right? That's not what I did, even if what way that you were raised or what you've done is still in that spectrum. So even in that case, we can look at the monster, and that's one of the things about monsters. We can look at them and say, that's not me. And so that distance between the two is often something which is hidden, because you can claim to not be that monster. There's a distance there. So
very interesting. I know another guy from Haiti who grew up in a very small apartment with his entire family around him. He became successful on Wall Street, graduated from Columbia or whatnot. But you talk to him and he's got nothing to say. You know what I mean? He's like,
you can be successful. I mean, you can look around, there are a lot of successful broken people. You don't have to be completely in touch with yourself to succeed financially. or to find people who are who will love you, or will decide to spend their time with you. And that's, otherwise, we wouldn't have any the birth rate would be way down. It's just a question of if you find yourself in an environment which is acclimated best for healing. Because if not, then what you've passed on, what you're not aware of, gets passed down in some way. And that's the kind of thing which leads to, I think, things which we'd rather not have with us. If you want to look at that,
Things that we have with us, we have it now. It's coming with us. We have to figure out a way to get rid of it, and it's very difficult because you are dealing with people who cannot outthink the abuse that they underwent, and they just can't stop. They cannot stop being that person that spent. I think about the dude that got went to prison for 30 years for a crime he didn't commit. It's fine. He gets out. He gets $1 million. He's not the person that went to prison. He's completely different. Probably a monster now. Inside, he can't ever escape the person that he became trying to survive 30 years in prison.
I give props to anybody who survives 30 years.
Survival, right? Wow, what a great word. What a beautiful word.
James Baldwin, I think, Go Tell on the Mountain is another good book to take a look at from the African perspective. But it's a narrative, somebody of a child really who's living in this abuse. And Baldwin does a really good job of, in a non-speculative setting, making the imagination known, making the emotion real.
Okay. And he's not writing anymore. He died in 1997, right?
He's gone.
Who's writing now in solarpunk? Is anybody kind of making a name for themselves?
Who's making a name for themselves in solarpunk? I can't think of any solarpunk novels off the top of my head, except for, I would say, hold on a second.
I actually have Wikipedia pulled up right now.
Oh, well, Kim Stanley Robinson, that would be one, who's still alive and making.
Oh, okay. I've read a bunch of his stuff. I wrote a good book about New York.
He's known for ecological fiction. And he was the guest of honor at Boscombe. And I asked him about solarpunk and stories that have a more functional, positive future in mind. And he said it's solarpunk. That's what he's talking about.
That's so interesting. You're saying this word to me, and I'm like, yeah, man, I want to get away from the negativity that I kind of write about and find something a little bit more intimate. And that's what it is, right? You're finding a character trying to work its way out of a bad situation by creating a better situation for himself and his family, and for anybody else who wants to follow suit.
And it's taking a hard look at the world that we live in, and then saying, okay, even though this is what we have, we can do something with this. There are things that, not so much, the individual, yes, because oftentimes you must, you have to have a main character, but looking at communities which are doing something different, different modes of storytelling, different thematic themes, which are being pulled apart. And it's not so much a hero's story. And I think some of the stories honestly have a lot in common with kind of the realist fiction, and just like the narrative is about this one person who is he or she is normal. There's nothing. It's not about them.
No divine calling to the adventure, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah. You get some of that, but sometimes it's just showing what can be done, and what can be done in a very real place, in a very real time. Even if the fiction, even if the science itself, just like any kind of genre fiction, there is some hand waving. But that's, you're not trying. The goal really is seeing how people can do this rather than relying on the new science. As a matter of fact, it's one of the tenets of science solarpunk is that you can do a lot with what you already have, and that much of the things that the advanced science we're waiting for, we don't need to wait for to make some of these decisions. It's just on a community level.
It's almost like you're working on social mechanisms. Basically, you're working with people. The people is the magic. Basically, how can you communicate best between A, B, and C to get the job done?
And the job is to changing the future, looking at futures as not this one this one thing that happens to us, but as a productive. It's a project. The future is a
Survival, like we talked about earlier. Survival is the ultimate goal for me
Oh,
and my children and my children's children.
well, I mean, yeah, survival, absolutely. But then healing, I think, would be a better term, because you can survive. The father you were talking about, he survived. He had to be in a situation where he wasn't allowed to really be expressive, but he still survived. People still survive. It's a question of healing, and the whole point of solar punk
Oh man,
is
really good
to
point.
heal, to heal, and to heal in a way that is not just individual healing, because the hero's arc does not necessarily have to be healing. It will be kind of like a coming to an understanding of self. Understanding of self does not always come with healing. It comes with you knowing enough to fulfill the quest. Feeling enough to fulfill the quest. But you may not necessarily be healed by the time you're done. Physically, you may be, but emotionally, maybe not. It may take a while. It may take a trilogy.
It's almost like the story after the quest, or the big epic journey, or whatnot. The recovery, how to fix your body
Yeah,
and mind.
So I think maybe in solar punk you might say the recovery starts on the page. It doesn't start afterwards.
Yeah. So I don't know when we started, actually. I know we started exactly at 1 o'clock, or actually 5 minutes before, trying to get connected, and we just had all those issues technologically. But I think we're sitting at about an hour right now. Do you have anything that you want people to know about a website, Twitter?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Twitter. I'm CPR Words, and I'm pretty active. My website is rob dash Cameron.com. And right now, the project I'm trying to get done as soon as possible is Kaleidocast. That's the story podcast that I produce, and we're always looking for subscribers. Subscribers get amazing, really cool stuff, including a personal story at like $6 a month. So definitely, that's Kaleidocast. That's KALEID as in dog, OCAST.NYC. And that is our story podcast. So it's where we take really, really well-known authors who might have stories which you haven't heard of, and also New York City authors who are brand new, who you've never heard of. And we give them both the spotlight. And we wrap it up with a really cool kind of speculative meta story, frame story.
Oh, pretty cool. Do you do, you're basically taking submissions from authors?
We're done with submissions. We're working on season 3 right now.
Oh, good for you guys.
Yeah,
What is it?
so
When's the release date?
Well, the pandemic has pushed that back, so I'm not really sure about that. But on the Patreon subscriber page, we already have produced audio and video and text and art and behind the scenes conversations with the authors and the artists, and kind of in-depth look. We have folklorists talking about some of the folklore mythos behind some of our stories. We're going to have music as well. So season 2, we have 2 original pieces of music. We're going to have it for season 3 as well. So you're going to get all that content there. So all the cool stuff that you would get that wraps around the Kaleidocast story itself.
Man, it's been fantastic talking to you. You have a giant knowledge base on this particular subject.
Thank you.
Getting into solar punk, I'm totally down. I want to write a story right now.
Look, I will tell you, if you want to get where do you want to start? You want to start with solar punk? I would say, hold on, I'm looking at my library to get the exact titles you want to start with. 2140, Kim Stanley Robinson's. That's his novel. Looking at the novel.
I read that. I'm actually got what am I reading right now? I don't think this is called solar punk, but it's Years of Rice and Salt.
Huh.
I think he's rewriting the discovery of America from the perspective of a Mongolian. It's really fascinating. I mean, I love that stuff.
Then also there's Solar Punk Summers, and there's also one called Solar Punk Ecology and Fantastic Stories. That's the one that is from Brazil.
And again, thank you so much for talking with me. Look forward to meeting you at KGB Fiction. Yeah. I can figure out what's going on.
Yeah, it's also they're since obviously they're not going there live. They are live streaming from YouTube, so you can do I think they're doing just look up KGB Fantastic Fiction, on YouTube, and you'll come up with Matthew Kressel's live stream of the event.
Okay, will do. Man, again, thank you so much. We'll talk again soon.
Okay.